Hey, listeners, I just want to give a little disclaimer that this particular episode does mention suicide and slavery. So if either of these are a trigger for you, you might want to skip on to the next episode.
I'm author Mark Muncy.
And I'm author Erika Lance.
And this is Eerie Travels. Hi, welcome back, gang. Greetings, travelers.
Ooh, hello.
And we are here. It is a frigid winter day again in Florida, where we're only breaking the 70s. So at least we're not dodging falling iguanas anymore. So
it actually was down into the 30s up here in North Carolina, up here in the Appalachians. I don't think I'm actually in the Appalachians. I like,
you're in the foothills. You're in the foothills.
I'm in the Blue Ridges. The Blue Ridges.
Yeah, that's a sub range. That's a sub range.
Yes. But it's actually 51 degrees here today, which is nice because it's been warmer. But the rest of the week, apparently freezing rain. So we're gonna have another cold front coming up. Where it's actually gonna get in the 50s again. But that's oh my gosh, it's 51
as it gets down here. You remember everybody has to wear a parka when it gets down into the 50s down here. So
the fact that you went to parka instead of like a winter coat, I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's Imbolc. So, which is what we celebrate this time of year.
Wait a minute. You're celebrating buying things in like large quantities?
No, not in bulk, not Costco. This is Imbolc, which is the Celtic or the Gaelic festival. It's mostly Wiccan use it now, but it's also a Christian holiday. It was St. Bridget's Day, but that actually comes from the Gaelic goddess Bridget, but they turned her into a human for Christianity. That's how, as they do.
Like you do.
Hey, they've got all these great holidays. Let's keep them. Let's just change them a little bit. But it's basically February 1st through February 2nd, and Saint Bridget, you leave out milk for her, just like Santa, but you also leave out wool because she's associated with, because this is basically the turning of the year. We're halfway through winter. We're between Yule and Ostara. We're halfway there. So spring isn't here yet, but the first signs are starting to show. This is usually when the baby sheep start showing up, and and she's a fertility character from the I'm going to use another word, the Tuatha De Danann, which is the Celtic pantheon, for a better word. It's not, they didn't really have like pantheons of gods. That was their belief system. I don't like saying the mythology or folklore. No, this is their world. So
well, I'm glad it's kind of colder out if you're going to leave milk out. I'm just going to throw that out there. I mean, just for sanitary purposes, I guess it's way better than have some sort of summer god that you're leaving milk out for, because I think you'll have a Ron Burgundy moment if you do that. It's like a really terrible idea. So happy Imbolc to anyone out there.
If you're Wicca, you decorate your candle, decorate your altar with some sun colored candles and some wool. And then if you're Christian, like I said, leave out the milk and make a little Bridget cross, which you do out of you do it like weaving leaves and stuff like that. So
well, now you just made this sound like a lot more work, because I could have thrown a pair of wool socks and a cup of milk out, but if I'm going to have to weave something, I'll leave that to the experts. I'm not weaving anything.
The other option is, hey, it's a fertility festival, so you can do things like that. So
that I'm down for. Count me in. 100%. I'm down for, fertility gods unite. I love that. No,
and
not all.
Now, before the show, before we start recording, you said you had news.
I do. I have to start with Robert, and we are speaking of Robert the doll. We love you.
We love Robert.
For sharing this, knowing that you would appreciate this as a warning to everyone in the entire universe. So the director, right? The director, whose name was Andrew Jones, who did an unapproved film about Robert the Doll. It was not approved.
That's right.
Unauthorized.
2016 classic Curse of Robert the Doll with the terrible, ugly version of him. Yes.
Exactly. Has died.
What? He was
is
a young guy.
39 years old and died of a rare condition called Cushing syndrome.
Wow.
So apparently he was in jail for tax evasion or something like that.
Yeah, they made those movies to avoid German taxes. So he was already not having a good time.
Not having a good time. Made an unapproved version of Robert the Doll. Don't do that. And has died of some weird rare disease. So
wow.
The moral here, Mark, Robert the Doll, you got to be nice to dolls.
Be nice to Robert.
Nice to dolls.
Yeah. Oh wait. Yeah. What do you think about that, Callie?
I am scared of the doll. He's a very handsome boy. I'd like to state that. For the record, we love Robert. Please don't kill me. That's all.
That was an official disclaimer from our producer that we all love Robert the Doll.
We all love Robert.
Robert the Doll is the best. And if we were to ever ask for his picture or video, we would ask permission way in advance.
And
otherwise,
Robert, Robert knows me from Curse of Robert the Doll, the authorized one where we had permission, and I was one of the safety instructors. Like, everybody has permission, every shot, everything. It was a lot of fun. So look, I'm not in jail for tax evasion, and I'm not dying of rare disease. So, just follow the rules. You'll be good.
I would like to state for the record that his two kids both got into car accidents about a month after he recorded that Robert Curse of the Doll thing. So I just want to put that out there. Robert, you're great. You're handsome. We love you.
Covering the bases.
Yep. And I'm just going to say this for my friend Susie. You're out there. I know you're listening. Be nice to dolls. I don't care how mad you get at them. Be nice to dolls, because I personally feel it is one of the easiest ways for the other side to be on this side. So be nice to them, because you never know what might be inhabiting one of them.
Yeah, it and mirrors. That's definitely effigies and mirrors. That's the key.
We have to do an episode talking about why not to have a mirror pointed at your bed. Oh, Callie, make a note about that. Yes. Okay. Sorry, changing subjects.
Yeah. Oh today, my gosh. Well, it's the only other thing we got to do is say hi to Puxatawny Phil for Groundhog Day, which is coming up. So,
hello. Please don't go back into your, hole or whatever. Don't do that.
It might throw off Imbolc. So we don't need that. So, but anywho, oh my gosh, yeah. So we should do another. I know we did a warning at the beginning.
So, I'll do a trigger warning here. Today, we're going to be talking about the massacre of Rosewood, which was a town in Florida. There is going to be, first of all, a lot of violence triggers, but it's a very racially motivated story of what happened to many Black Americans at that time in that city. So, super trigger warning, if you're triggered by anything having to do with racism or violence, there are lynchings involved in this. So unfortunately, this is the episode. We want to pay some honor to this, discussing it, because it was lost to history, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But if it's a lot for you, please skip this episode and join us for our next one.
It is the 100th anniversary of this event. So of this dark history and just this terrible thing that happened. So we felt, we have to bring it up. It is Black History Month, and this was forgotten for way too long. And even now,
I think we should, when we say the word forgotten, I think we should do a little bit of a tweak to that. And I know you agree with me, Mark, which is there are some parts of history that I know are coming up more and more, where people are actually acknowledging what happened versus pretending like it didn't happen, because it's not like it was something everybody just didn't remember. There were people went out of their way to make sure that this was erased from history as a conversation.
And there was a culture of silence, and we'll get into that towards the end here about it,
yes,
because for those that survived it, because they did not want to talk about this. It was definitely a crazy, crazy time. But I guess the best way to start is to go, back to the beginning on this. So literally 100 years ago, there was a town called Rosewood, and it was up in the panhandle of Florida, and it was separated by a few miles from the towns of Cedar Key and the town of Sumner. And Rosewood was kind of named, it had a lot of red cedar up there in the panhandle. We don't get a lot of cedars here in Florida. They tend to stop, right about panhandle, but this area had tons of them. And so they were being used for pencils at the local sawmills. And this kind of city had about a population of around 100 that we know of. And it had about 20 some odd houses. The majority of them were Black families. There were 4 white families living in this town. The rest were doing well, prosperous. They were working at the mill in Sumner, and some were working as farmers, and they were, and these were freed people. This was, early 1920s. So, this is not, the slave days and all that, but it's still fresh in people's minds. And then what happens is terrible. It's New Year's Day of 1923, 100 years ago, and a lady there just, gosh, I hate, all right, I'm already losing it. Geez, I just, so Fannie Taylor, it hits me so hard, this story. Fannie Taylor, she is a married white woman in Sumner. She has a couple people from Rosewood who work in her house, and she had a bad day and got beat up by somebody and assaulted. And she said that it was a black man. Black man came in and beat her up. Now, the day before, the nearby town, Levy County Sheriff, he says, or Levy County, depending on where you're from in that area to pronounce it. He says that there's a large black man had escaped off of a chain gang nearby, right near the Florida-Alabama border. And so he might be coming through Rosewood, which is an area that he was also patrolled. So when she comes out screaming, help me, I've been attacked, and it was a large black man, it gets out fast. All the workers are pouring out of the mill. They want vengeance. And it's, they want blood. They will settle for nothing less. A white woman being attacked by a black man, we can't have that. And so they decide, it's got to be this guy who escaped off the prison gang that was out doing road work and stuff like that. So must be him. It has to be, because they knew the family in Rosewood. They were not problem people, as they called them. They used another word that we won't use on the show. They were good people. They worked hard. They had families, and they bought businesses. They bought stuff. They had businesses. And so, but you can't have that. So they must be hiding him. So they went over to the town, just a few miles away, to get vengeance. And they were looking for this guy who had escaped off the farm. And which is, and the sheriff, brought him over there because he wanted to try to keep order. He knew this was a powder keg of a situation. And
And one thing, we should clarify, just going back, so when you said assault, when Fanny said she was assaulted, she actually specifically said she wasn't raped. She was
Yeah.
just beat up by whoever this person was.
yeah, they were like, "Oh, you were raped by a black man?" And she's like, "No, I was just beat up." Because even she didn't want to say that, because then she would be, that was a unforgivable sin. Beat up, sure,
And
but
when you say a chain gang, because unfortunately chain gangs, no, fortunately, sorry,
yes,
chain gangs are not something that exists anymore, but it used to be when they would bring prisoners out and they would tie them together with chains to do work. And
Yep.
that's why they called it a chain
chain
gang.
gang. Yeah, most famously presented in the movies Life, with Eddie Murphy, and then Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with George Clooney, where they escape off of a chain gang and they're chained together, and and they've got to run together and do all these things together, because you're stuck, with the guy next to you. So
Yeah.
this guy had escaped on his own, and so basically they go to see what's going on, right? And some people say that she was lying. That's really what this boils down to. Some further investigations suggested that she'd actually been assaulted by a white lover, but she didn't want her husband to know about it.
And there was eyewitnesses that came forward after indicating that they even saw this white man.
One of the little kids who worked in the house later said that it was a white man who did it. And so what happens though is when the sheriff gets there, he's got the bloodhounds, and they get a scent off of her clothes, and they track it on the road towards Rosewood. They actually take it to a blacksmith just outside of Rosewood. And so when they get to the blacksmith, the scent just kind of stops. And no one seems to really know what's going, but they find this empty house where it just kind of stopped out of, just right near the blacksmith. And they go over to the man who owned the house, and his name was Aaron Carrier, and he was a World War I veteran, a lumberjack, black man, and he was living at his mother's home at the time, Sarah Carrier, and he was recovering from some unknown illness. We don't really know, but he was laying on a couch there. And but they were like, well, he owns that house, the mob, and they're like, so he must be the man that helped this guy, or got this guy away, whatever. He knows the blacksmith. So
I
what
think
happens
that
is
one thing we should touch on too, and I'm sorry, Mark,
That's right.
I'm gonna just is that there's such a thing as a mob mentality, which unfortunately we still see today,
Yes.
where it doesn't matter what logic, reason, anything that gets told, they don't care as long as they can find something to focus whatever this generally very negative emotional track to. And that's what they did, was instead of going, oh, the trail ended, we might not find this person, we don't know who they are, they go, well, it's got to, obviously it's this next person
It's got to be this guy. It's got to be that guy. Yeah.
happened to be a black man
Yep.
at this time.
And so they go in to grab the guy. They bust into the Carrier house, and they threaten him with a rope. They're gonna hang him. And then the sheriff realizes he's lost control at this point, and he tries to do the right thing. He's like, I will take this man into my custody, and I'm taking him to the marshal, and I'm going to take him back to my jail. We'll, back in Sumner, and we'll let a judge decide this. We aren't going to let this escalate. And, and this is all, we've gotten this through secondhand testimony from a couple of the kids who witnessed this. but this is years later. So, all we know is at the time he takes him away. Now, while he's taking them away, the mob kind of disperses, but then they realize they have not had their bloodlust settled. And while they're walking back towards Sumner, a cart with turpentine barrels from the sawmill comes on, and on that is another black man named Sam Carter. And that's where they decide, oh wait, he works for the blacksmith and he's got this cart. That's why the bloodhounds lost the trail. The reason he's coming back this way is he took somebody somewhere to get him away. He helped this other guy escape. So they tie a rope around him and start torturing him.
Well,
and
it's, these are the type of things, and that's why we gave the trigger warning, which is they, one of these gentlemen, they literally tied to a car and drove
that's
the next town over.
They tied him up and were torturing him, and he finally says, fine, I'll take you where I took the man. And because what are you going to do? You give him anything, right? If you're got a rope around your neck and a knife in your side, you're going to say anything. And so they take him to this other place, but the dogs did not pick up the scent because there was no scent to be picked up. And so this time they were, really putting it to him. It's like, where? And finally some guy, a man named Bryant Hudson, kills him with a shotgun, just is tired of with all his lies. And with that, that's the first death that we know of in the Rosewood Massacre. And that's where it starts. It's terrifying.
So it begins on a lie.
Yeah, begins on a lie
of somebody trying to save their reputation from, technically at that time, a crime they committed, because back then adultery was a crime.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the reasons. And also she just didn't want her husband to know, but she was kind of known as kind of the town floozy, that, kind of, everybody has had some time with her. So, this was just what happened that day. We don't know. And then, like I said, this is just escalating, and this is the start. John Singleton, who had made Boys in the Hood, found this story, and this was one of his few projects that he made. And it's a powerful movie, but it's very fictionalized. But it tells this story, probably one of the most brutal depictions of violence in a movie, especially at the time. But it condenses a lot, it cuts out a lot, adds a few things that didn't happen, invents a whole new character, and I think that kind of takes away from what actually happened. So that's why we're doing this as best we can, trying to cover the important bits, because basically what happens that in the movie, it's all one night, but in reality, that next day things had calmed down. It's like, oh, we killed the guy, we've done what we need to do, and it's but what happened was the story had spread. It was slowly spreading. Remember, this is before cell phones, before internet. Newspapers are barely picking this up, that a white woman was attacked. Well, the nearby paper that gets it is in Gainesville, and then another one in Tallahassee, and the Tallahassee paper gets it. And the Tallahassee, the governor reads it, but what he's also having to deal with is there is an organization that is having their annual meeting nearby called the Ku Klux Klan, and they get this notice. So they are like, what? This cannot be. And so by now the rumors are swelling that there are armed mobs of black men, attacking white women and children and all this other stuff. So they decide to retaliate, and they start marching on the town a couple days,
and it
about
got
a day away.
posted all the way to the New York Times, didn't it?
Yes,
It made it to the New York Times as this story, and much like the game of telephone, instead of again, any truth whatsoever or anybody investigating it was a rumor taken that this had happened, and that it changed from it was this prisoner who had gotten away to the Black community in Rosewood was hiding this prisoner that had done this.
Yeah.
And so thereby, for stoking the flames of this, there's still this danger happening, this danger out there, and you have to do something about it. And I mean, it's just horrifying. It's horrifying how this transpired.
So Tuesday and Wednesday are pretty quiet, but the rumors are circulating. Things are getting worse. The nearby town of Cedar Key is where everybody seems to be organizing, and then they drive up to Sumner to head over to Rosewood. They're using Sumner as their base of operations and Cedar Key as their base of operations. And by January 4th, they're on the march again for Rosewood. And we don't know 100% the reasons, but they went to this one house which was being used by all the women and children to hide because they'd heard this was happening. They heard this was coming. And the sheriff at this point was not to be found. He was dealing with the governor, and he was dealing with others, because the governor calls him and says, "Hey, I hear things are getting out of hand. I'm willing to send in the guard to help." And he's like, "No," the sheriff's like, "No, I've talked to the other sheriffs in the area. They're coming to help." What he didn't realize was the other sheriffs were coming to help hunt the black people, this one guy, but also the people who were helping him. And he thought they were coming to help him keep the peace.
Yeah, he wasn't coming to keep the peace. It was coming to be part and lead the mob and probably give it some not, in their minds, some officialness. They're being official because it has members of the sheriff's department, and they're going to get to the bottom of it. So we're talking at this point, before this mob even shows back up again, 2 people have lost their lives unjustified to this situation. And the Black citizens of that town were living in terror because although
they're all hiding.
Quiet, people are hiding. They don't
hiding.
This is done.
They're hiding in this one house of Sarah Carrier. She's hiding all the women and children because she worked in Sumner cleaning their clothes and stuff like that. She was one of the ones that kind of saw what was going on and saw how this was building. And so she's like, "I'm bringing all the kids into my place. They know me. They're not going to burn my house down. I'll protect your families and all this." But, and, there's the great quote from Sarah's grandniece, who's one of the ones who testifies on this many years later, says, so I'm going to use some fun words here. "These crackers look like they're going to raise sand up here. They're going to come back and try to kill us all." And that's her quote. And she was not wrong. I think we should probably go ahead and take our break, because from here on in, it's dark. So if you've stayed with us this long, thank you. And, if you can't go on any further, no hard feelings. We understand. But this is something you should know. This is not taught in your history books. So if you can, please stick with us. Come back after the break, and we'll tell you more about what's going on.
We'll be right back with Eerie Travels.
Eerie, Appalachia, Gear up for a frightful jaunt into the darkest reaches of the ancient Appalachians. Folks deep within the Appalachian hollers lean close to the campfire to share stories of the inexplicable with hushed awe. Monsters rumbling in the hills, strange lights darting through the pitch black night sky, horrible occurrences almost ineffable in their bizarre tragedy. Tall tales, you might say. Tell that to the Flatwoods monster in Braxton County, West Virginia, or the Goat Man of Louisville. Look into his humanoid eyes and let him know you don't believe. And what of those apparitions in Mammoth Cave's Corpse Rock, or the Satan spawn known as the Jersey Devil? How do you respond when confronted by these mysteries? From the metaphysical energy that swirls near Serpent Mound in Ohio to Point Pleasant's Mothman legacy, Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz explore the dark history lurking in the shadows of Appalachia. Read by Mark Muncy, author and experts on strange folklore with appearances on shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Robert the Doll, and many, many more.
Greetings, mortals and others. I'm Dick Terhune, the voice from hell. I work with haunted attractions all over the US, Canada, and Europe to increase audiences and enhance their experience with highly effective commercials, narrations, animatronic character voices, whatever your dark heart desires. Let me help you do more, scare more, profit more. Find out more at Voice from Hell on Facebook and at voicefromhell.com.
Yeah, so we're back.
We're back and the mob has gathered.
Yes, and they go to Sarah Carrier's house where all the women and children are hiding, and they demand that everybody come out. We want to find this guy. We know you're hiding him. And Sarah's son, his name's Sylvester, he's got a gun. And he's not going to go out, and somebody there gets attacked by a small dog. And another trigger warning coming up, specifically for Callie. And one of the gang decides, put that dog down and shoots the dog. And then because they do that, gunfire erupts. Everybody starts shooting at the house, and Sarah Carrier's first one hit. And
so this is a house full of women and children.
And one man named Sylvester who did have a gun, who fights back, because that's what happens. They decide to break into that house. Now at this point, the kids are running out the back door, right? These guys aren't smart enough to surround the house, and they start running to the swamps. They run to
which is good that they weren't smart enough to surround the house, because there would have been a lot more casualties. Not that there weren't way too many casualties, but we're talking women and children here too that would have just grown in number because of sheer stupidity of this group of people.
Yep. And then what happens is as they're running, they also go to this guy named John Wright. He's a white shopkeeper in town. He has a big 2-story home, and some of the kids run into his house. And he's gonna, he hides them, kind of hides them behind some stashes of lumber. There's one of the big things in this city is a juke joint, which is what we would call like a bar, kind of place, and a couple of the employees from that place escaped there too. But back at the Carrier house, there's a boy upstairs. His name is Langley. He was 9 at the time, and some of the gunfire is spreading into the house. He was upstairs, and a glass window shatters and takes out his eye. He's one of the men to testify many, many years later. He came down the stairs and saw what happens next, which was Sylvester was in the hallway, and the 2 men came in and kicked open the door, and Sylvester let them both have it with a shotgun and killed the 2 white men, which are 2 of the recorded deaths at this event. Because that's
the number of deaths has there's been rumor going all the way from very few all the way up to 150, and I think most have been discounted now down to around 26, right? How many?
Yeah,
How many
that's
do
we right now we only know official account was still only 6.
So
Because-
at this point, though, we're at 5 because we have Sarah, the 2 black gentlemen that died in the beginning of this, and
Yeah.
these 2 white gentlemen who just got shot with a shotgun.
Right.
Okay.
And so now Sylvester apparently escapes out the back door with this kid at that point. They run. And everybody's backing off because they just watched 2 guys get gunned down in front of them. So the mob is not as brave as it once was. So they run back out. But now the problem is 2 white men are dead, killed by black men. So guess what? That makes it 10 times worse in the papers. That makes it 10 times worse amongst the rumor mill. The KKK is on its way. All these sheriffs are coming with their men. Dozens of men start flooding the town. So the next day, they come into town and apparently they kill Sylvester somewhere in the woods. They found him and killed him. Now that one is a maybe, again, not documented, but the rumor is that they got him. So now at this point, the town is emptying. Everybody is fleeing the town because they know more trouble is coming. They know it's going to be bad. And the mob decides as they get there that night and the next day, this town cannot, we have to kill everybody. And so they start burning the town to the ground. Nearly every structure in Rosewood is being burnt to the ground except for Mr. Wright's house because he's the white guy. So it's all good. We're not going to burn his house or his store. So
well, and it's interesting that this went from finding supposed justice for Fanny to we're going to destroy literally an entire town.
Yep.
Except for because this one gentleman has white skin, we're going to leave his house. I'm sure little did they know that there were people from that community that were hiding there for it to be safe.
Right.
But you
Exactly.
have all of these people that are displaced from their homes and being hunted for no justifiable reason.
Yep. And now this is where, like I said, history, that's all the documentation we really have of deaths and the violence. And that's the scary thing, because what happens is these people who fled, families fled into the swamps, fled into the woods, fled into other buildings. They all say, no, some of us ran to the church. Some of them ran to these other houses and they were massacred to a person. The church was burned down, even though the bells were ringing that it was safe to come into town, but it was just to lure them in. And they, and all this stuff comes out years later in testimony, but not the initial testimony. And then we're going to get into that real quickly, because what happens is they get to there, the sheriff finally arrives back. He sees the 2 white men on the carrier porch, and basically a grand total of 2 white men and 6 black men. So the grand total is 8 deaths altogether. Now, one of the people who died that we know was Sarah Carrier's husband. And what they had done with him was, again, they captured him and asked him, where is this boy that escaped off the prison? We know you all been hiding him. And he's like, why have you not buried my wife? What is going on? He was a lame, person. He couldn't walk, he couldn't run. They found him hiding in a shed. So that's why they decided he must know something. And they're like, well, fine, you want to bury your wife, bury her. So they made him dig her grave, and then they shot him in her grave and buried her with him. It's terrible, the things that were going on. So that's one of the other men that we know of. 2 more strung up. their ears were cut off. I mean, for some reason, there's no reasons for any of this.
There's
This
no
is
reason for
madness.
anything that they're doing now other than hate.
Exactly. This is pure hate and resentment that this town was doing better than Sumner, which is, the white town. This town was better off because they were cleaner. All their houses were white because they wanted to keep their houses clean. They thought it should always be white. Some of the residents of Rosewood were joking that they'd never seen a different colored house ever until they got to Gainesville, when they escaped. And one of the most amazing parts of this is all the men, this whole town was hiding in the swamps and all this. There was a train that went past Rosewood, that went past Sumner, and the two guys who ran it were Civil War vets, and they did business in Sumner. They did business in Rosewood. They were the ones who actually picked up a lot of the survivors and took them through on the train, took them through Sumner to get them away. It was a private train, so they could do that. And they had them hiding in the back of the train so that the white folks wouldn't see them. It's a pretty incredible part. It actually becomes a major part of the movie version because, that's heroic. It's a cool scene. But again, it was a small part.
It's wonderful that so many people in these communities were willing to help versus just this horrific mob mentality.
Yep. So a lot of people make it to Gainesville. A lot of people hide in the swamps for days. And basically the newspapers at this point say, hey, this happened. It was, and then there's pictures of the town burning. So they realized this was not a simple thing. This was not anything that should have been thing. So the governor orders a independent council to study this and figure out what happened and see who all needs to be held accountable for this madness. And the grand jury convenes. And since they can't find any witnesses, it's, there was no crime.
Oh, I'm quite sure they couldn't find any witnesses,
Well, and what happened was what happens after this is everybody fled. They all went as far away as they could. Who would want to ever come back?
Well, not only that, who would want to say anything? I mean, we're talking about a time when something like this could even happen. And unfortunately, we're still at a time when things like this happen. And so many emotions on this.
But I know. And go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that there's literally, I wouldn't testify. I mean, how are you going to come out of the woodwork and explain what happened to you without putting an even larger target that was already on you? It's not like, hey, it's safe and, the cavalry rode in and they got these guys that committed these atrocities and they brought them to, none of that happened. It's like, hey, I'm going to launch an inquiry to see what actually happened. You're not going to get any results.
No.
This is all just pomp and circumstance.
And that's just it. What happens is, as they run, they change their names, they change their lives because they're terrified somebody's going to hunt them down. And that's what one of the ladies that I got to talk to was a granddaughter of one of the victims. Her grandmother was one of the little kids at the time, talked about her time in Rosewood and that they didn't want to talk about it because they were afraid somebody would figure out, oh, they escaped, and they were still looking for that guy who escaped that they never caught. That guy disappeared into the swamps. He's probably got eaten by an alligator or something. So all of this original ruckus for nothing. And it's crazy to think, the guy who ran the shop, he invited everybody back a few years later, but of course nobody came back. Why would you? It would just be, it'd be terrible. You'd be afraid to be hunted down by vigilantes. The Klan knew about all this. The Klan participated in this. They're all over. You don't know who's a member. This could be terrible. And so it literally disappears from the record. except for these newspaper articles and that one trial. Until 1980s, 60 years pass, and a reporter decides he's going to look into stories about the Panhandle, probably something about alligator wrestlers, or, who knows? It's the forgotten coast, Cedar Key, that whole area. Nobody talks about it. And as he's there, it's 1980s, and he just wonders, man, this town of Cedar Key is like all white people. And so he asks a woman, just kind of chatting, at this church, says, why are there no black residents here? And she immediately turns on him and says, I know what you're digging for. You want to learn about the massacre. And he's like, huh? Yeah, what are you talking about? And immediately he starts digging into it to figure it out. And she actually drives him to the site of Rosewood. And there's a few mobile homes, but not anything else. And people had said they'd heard vague things, all this. And so finally, University of Gainesville, the library there says, no, what are you talking about? That never happened. That's not a real thing. And they finally finds the article from the 1923 newspaper, and it was all over the newspapers. When he starts looking, it's all over the country. Why did this disappear? And so he tracks down people, and for the St. Pete Times, he writes this amazing story that brought it all to life. And then 60 Minutes goes and finds some of the survivors and tracks them down and runs a thing on it. And in 1993, or 1983. So, but it takes another 10 years. 1992, the survivors finally file a legal claim against the state of Florida and say, you didn't protect us. And they do a full report. And that's when it finally comes to life, everything. And that's where these trials and these hearings come forward. 1994, they finally gave everybody a chance to right the wrongs. And that's when these people came forward and did their testimony. So that is nearly 60 years later, over 60 years later, before they're allowed to even talk about this. And that's where we get these accounts. And we find, and these kids are talking about, kids at the time, talking about stepping over numerous bodies, mass graves. None of this has ever been found. No one's ever really searched the area as much as it should be, because it's swamp. There's not a lot there. But the legislature finally decides to approve a reparations for this, and they issued checks of about $150,000 to the 9 people who could prove they lived there.
Yeah, they called that was called the Rosewood Compensation Bill, right?
Yep. And they also set up a scholarship for any of their descendants would have free college as long as you could prove you were descended from someone who lived in Rosewood in perpetuity. It's there forever. And now the Tulsa massacre in Texas, there was an Ocoee massacre, which isn't too far away, that also happened. They are still trying to get reparations for those events, and nothing's happened. So this was a unique case that it actually did occur.
It's good that one part of it is good,
yeah.
But coming back 60 years later to try to, because they didn't even come close to the amount of families that I'm sure have descendants that had lived in Rosewood, because they all ran. Like, how are you going to prove that when you wipe out an entire town?
If you changed your name, you changed your life, that's, and again, you probably didn't want to talk about it ever. I guarantee you there are some families that don't know that they have residents, that one of their family was from Rosewood. He took a train to Chicago, worked in a meat plant. That family didn't find out till his deathbed
Well, and
and
I'm sure there are ones that just didn't even discuss it. You wipe that off the map. You don't
Yeah.
bring that up again.
it's just,
And which is what was done. I think it's important that we say that there is now one remaining building from Rosewood,
Yeah.
correct?
the right farm, his store, it's a big fancy house, and that's all that's left there. There is a historic marker there. It was put up 2004. It is frequently vandalized, of course, which is terrible. That just shows you that we are not over this, even though it should be something that everybody knows. It's another one of those that it's, this day of remembrance, finally, after 100 years, January 7th, we had the 100th anniversary took place in Gainesville. Didn't even do it in Rosewood. Did it in Gainesville because there was no Rosewood left. There is one of the oh gosh, what's it? One of the survivors bought a farm there, and so that there would still be a park, so that it would be remembered.
There is a Rosewood Foundation.
The Real Rosewood Foundation, yes.
So it's rosewoodflorida.com. It's the Real Rosewood, and they take donations. And I'm going to urge all of our listeners, because continuing education, continuing understanding, and education to start actually learning how not to repeat history like this, and the differences that have to get made, because this is nothing short of just a complete horror story, and that we're remembering it 100 years later.
Yeah, and the I finally remember the name of the man. Marvin Dunn is the man who owns the plot of land for Rosewood, where he's made the mark. They moved the marker to his land so that it would be safe, and he's making a park there, and he's part of that group. So yes, definitely, please donate, do what you can. It's
and educate yourself and be willing to make a change. It's going to take every single one of us doing things differently to make a change. I mean, we have a lot of fun with this podcast and talking about weird and strange things, but like just this week alone, there have been 3 mass shootings in California. The violence has to end, and it ends by all of us getting ourselves educated and doing something to make a difference. Yep. So I know this isn't a typical story for us, but I agree, Mark. It's 100% important that we bring this story and make sure it doesn't disappear again.
Yeah, it was. I felt when I was doing research for my second book, it was one of those that I wanted to put in the first book, but I couldn't get a lot of information on it. Even then, 2015, it was hard to get information on the original event. And then I was able to talk to a couple of the families of the survivors who had, firsthand accounts of this. And they were walking over, where they say, oh, 3 guys got shot. No, they said there were dozens. And that's vague, very vivid memories for them. They were traumatized, and their family, it's an inherited trauma. They've got to deal with all this. And it's now that we're finally able to talk about it. I remember, was it the Watchmen TV show a couple of years ago, did a thing on the Tulsa massacre, and a lot of people didn't think that was real. They thought it was just television. And like I said, the Rosewood movie helped, but again, that was Hollywood. It was a Hollywood version, but it is still something. If you watch it, you'll get a big taste of what happened.
Yeah. And there's a great 60 minutes that was done on this that gives even more firsthand accounts. So please, what we're going to ask you is, of course, if you have a short story out there, we always ask, regardless of the story, please feel free to share it with us. Go to eerietravels.com. We would love to hear your stories. We only hope that everybody out there listening takes some time and finds ways to make a difference in this world, because this is our world and we have to be responsible for it. So I think I speak for me and Mark. This is horrific. We were glad we were able to bring it to you. If this is the first time you're ever hearing about it, but do take some time to make a difference. Take some time to do something.
Yeah.
And we'll include how to donate in our show notes. And Mark, is there anything else?
I mean, again, it's one of those, like I said, if you have a story that you want us to dig into that you feel hasn't been touched, something dark history, or even just, something unusual, yeah, definitely drop us a line. We're happy to look into it and discuss. I mean, these are things that we have to keep alive, just as like we keep the folklore alive. We keep this is history that could have been lost and was lost. Thankfully, has been regained and can teach us. And if we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And we should never do that.
And unfortunately, that's what's happening right now. So I think for me and Mark here at Eerie Travels, we hope you have a good night and thank you for staying with us on this particular tale.
Yeah. Thank you so
We'll
much.
see you
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.